It comes down to this. Patrick Mahomes is the ultimate cheat code, and everything else revolves around him. What does that mean for this draft and how they move forward on, I think maybe we'll call it Retool version 2 here. Matt Derrick's here from ChiefsDigest.com to give us the answers right now on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, friends and neighbors. It is Locked On Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for free on every platform, starting with YouTube. Go like and sub to us over there, and go check out another Locked On show for your next one. This is a fun day because we're boiling down what Matt and I have been talking about for, I don't know, at least 12 months, maybe then some. And it's hype and it's fall and everything ends up being okay in the end. We're going to go through the scenarios of what the human cheat code does for you. He's Matt Derrick from ChiefsDigest.com, our beat reporter on the scene. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, the place that you can right now, despite the fact that I'm about to cover up Matt's face, you can go get the Athletic Matrix right now. You can pre-order it at rogueapc.com. It should be out in the next few days. It's Matrix LOC is your code to get a nice hefty discount. And that is all my draft work, all my team's draft work, film grades, athleticism, all the stuff that you need to know. And we're going to talk about some of the guys that are in there today, so please check that out, as well as NFL 33 and RGR football, where you can find me as well. Matt, Chiefs Digest is the heartbeat of what goes on in Chiefs Kingdom, especially out at that building that has been radio silent this whole offseason. So to have this kind of concept come out and finally the national media is starting to catch on to what we've been saying for like the last year plus, is there anything that you've seen since the departure of Tyreek Hill that has made you think maybe they do have to come up with another plan? Or does it boil down to the simple fact that as long as you have Mahomes, nothing else matters as long as you give him what he needs?
I think you pick a fine dividing line to kind of analyze it there, because I think the Tyreek Hill trade was maybe the first evident piece of what the future of the Chiefs is going to look like in the Patrick Mahomes era, which is that, you know, you're going to end up taking a lot of shots in the draft, and and moving and finding ways to get a lot of draft picks every year, so you can take some shots, you can get guys in the middle rounds, and build a team that is consistently going to be young, but it's going to have Mahomes around it. And there's going to be, you know, young talent coming in, so that you're going to have maybe more churn. You're going to have more guys. You're going to have more guys on rookie contracts. You're going to have more younger players, but that's not a bad thing, especially if you're bringing them in with quality draft picks. And that was the heart of the Tyreek Hill trade. I mean, if the Chiefs were going to walk away from Tyreek Hill, they had to do it for a big haul, and that's exactly what they got. So, and it paid off, because now, you know, not only did they have draft picks last year, they got draft picks this year. They're going to have draft picks next year too. And that's going to be the continual process for this team. They're going to continue to find ways to have an excess of picks in the draft. I don't think that Brett Veach wants to be in a spot where he's picking like 5 or 6 guys again. I think he's going to want to be more like the 10 that we're seeing every single year, because that's how you manage life with a contract for your quarterback that is mega. And Mahomes' contract is only going to get bigger, because he's got a big contract now. He's going to get renegotiated in a couple of years. It's going to get bigger after that. And how do you live when your quarterback is making $45, $50, $60 million against the cap? You get young players that can play. And you don't do that by signing 18 undrafted free agents and hoping they hit. You do it by drafting 10 guys. And, you know, and last year, okay, the Chiefs have like 8 or 9 guys that are playing right now. That's not going to happen every year, but you're hoping that out of that 10 picks every year that you're going to get 6 or 7 quality players.
You got to keep hoping that, right? And there's a couple of ideas that come to pass here. We're going to talk about weapons later in the show, but in terms of what I said to the beginning of the show, it's about giving Patrick what he needs. And that comes down to this philosophy we saw them use on the offensive line, and is protect Patrick, good things happen. We've seen them roll through, and obviously Andrew Wiley was here for a long time. They went out and got Orlando Brown. Those two pieces, the bookends that protect the edges of what Patrick does best, are now moving on. So it becomes the question of, how do you give him what he needs, and what does he need to be successful? I think as we look back on the Orlando Brown era, we can see that this was a departure, an atypical departure from what the Chiefs have done in the past. I feel Juwan Taylor is a return to that, in that being the more fleet of foot, the more athletic type, maybe a little underpowered. And for Juwan in particular, a guy that came to the league and had to grow before the Chiefs were ready to make him a player that protects Patrick Mahomes. I think that applies to the draft as well. But do you see it the same way? Is this a return to what we've seen from them in the past?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it is. I mean, the Chiefs were in a period of time there, and that's why I think that mindset's a big part of it, because the Chiefs aren't chasing anything anymore. I mean, the one thing that they're chasing is they're chasing legacies. They're chasing greatness. They're not chasing a ring like they were. And when you're chasing a ring, you do things that don't make long-term sense, that are not things that fit in necessarily with a 5-year plan. You can look at a lot of teams around the league and you're seeing it. I think Buffalo has been in that mode the last couple of years because they're so close to a Super Bowl that they can taste it. And they're doing things that are enabling and ensuring that 5 years from now, they're going to have problems. The Chiefs kind of did that. I mean, end of John Dorsey, the beginning of the Brett Veach era, they kind of did that. They gave away some contracts to some big veterans. They went out and made some splashy free agent signings that were maybe way above market. And they did it because they were chasing that ring. And Brett Veach will continue to say, Sammy Watkins, Frank Clark, those were good signings because they got the ring that they were wanting. And I'm not going to argue with that either. But that's not where this team is at anymore. Where this team is right now is that Brett Veach is still going to be who he is. He's investigating every single deal. But the fact that he tries to look at an A.J. Brown, the fact that they go out and they get an Orlando Brown but don't offer him a long-term deal. They kick the tires on DeAndre Hopkins and Odell Beckham, but they're not paying the farm for any of these guys, tells you to me that the Chiefs are going to investigate everything. They're going to consider all possibilities. But Brett Veach right now is only making deals that make sense now and in the future.
I like the way that goes. The future is what we need to talk about. How do they do that? How do they do the two things? Protect him by giving him guys that create a wall for him, and protect him by giving him targets to get the ball to as quickly as possible and without getting hit. We'll talk about both of those aspects here in further detail. But if you have a chance to take, you want to do it now because the NBA playoffs are in full swing. And they are going to get really heated now that March Madness is over. Congrats, UConn. Sorry, it couldn't be a Jayhawk win, but that is what it is. Right now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and get in the action. The NHL is coming along too. I just want to throw that out there because right now they're giving you a no-sweat first bet. So when you sign up, you can earn up to $1,000 if your first bet does not win for you. That's bonus bets applied to your account if it doesn't win. You can download the app for FanDuel. It's safe, secure, easy to use, and makes everything easy for you, from three-pointers to points in the paint, everything that goes on in basketball. We'll get into more as we go down the line for hockey because that's where I'm starting to pay attention. It's always draft season around here, but it's always hockey season too, so check that out. Everything that you need is right there at your fingertips, so combine it all for a bigger payout for a same-game parlay. That's what you really get the action going, and it's all right there for a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets. When you go to FanDuel.com/locked-on, you can see it right down on this side of the screen. There we go. It's FanDuel.com/locked-on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Now, if I was a sportsbook partner of the NBA, I'd be betting on the Chiefs getting more protection. To me, I think what last year proved is that protection is paramount, more of a priority than target share is. Do you agree with that? And do you think that there's evidence from Brett Veach that that's the way they feel as well?
Yeah, I think there probably is some evidence. I mean, both anecdotal and, metric wise, I think there's some evidence that that's the way that they believe in things. I mean, and certainly if you look at the language of Brett Veach over the last couple of years, I think that's a big part of it. You look at their actions, I think it's a big part of it. If you look at the way that they build their line, I mean, and the people that they have chosen to invest in and not invest in, I think that tells a story. I mean, the Chiefs are, trying to find a line that, while from the outside perspective, maybe it doesn't look like that it's the best offensive line in the league. What they're trying to do is build the best offensive line for Patrick Mahomes. And those two might not be the same thing, because there's some guys out there who might be perfectly good. Orlando Brown is perfectly good. Is he a perfect fit for the Chiefs offense? That's where, intelligent minds can differ. There can be a difference of opinion there. That's where I see that the Chiefs, what their approach is that they're definitely trying to be something that they're building it around their cheat code. Absolutely. And some of that they realize is that now that Patrick Mahomes is in his career, he's not the 23-year-old in his first year starting anymore with one game under his belt. He's a two-time MVP, and you're paying him like that. So, yeah, you're going to invest in protecting that asset, but that also means that you can't do the things you were doing a few years ago as far as paying receivers and having a guy making 18, 16 million a year like Sammy Watkins, or a guy, making double digits like Tyreek Hill was. It means you're going to have to invest in different ways. And that's why I say, what's the investment now? You spent a second round pick on Sky Moore last year. You're going to put some draft picks into this year's draft. I wouldn't surprise me if the Chiefs came out away with two wide receivers. Wouldn't surprise me if they traded up for wide receivers. So it could very well be that they might end up spending 3 draft picks on receiver talent in this draft. When you look at it that way, that's an investment. So just because they're not spending the free agent dollars and they're not building it the way that some other teams are, they're building a realistic lineup that fits around their quarterback. And right now, at this point in his career, it's more important to protect Mahomes than to give him fancy targets everywhere. And of course, he has the best target in the league, Travis Kelce.
Well, and I like that philosophy. And we're going to talk about some of the guys that are options for those targets. It's fun that you mentioned possible 2 wide receiver selections in this draft. That's something I floated last week as well. We'll talk about that in the upcoming segment. But to get there, you got to take first things first. And we both agree it is the protection. And I think the best thing about what we've seen, and a lot of people have complained about, you were willing to give Orlando this money. How did you give what people consider to be a more project player in Jawaan Taylor the same money? But there's one key difference, and it does go back to the philosophy of how you run the offense, whether it's zone blocking in the run game or whether it's just the general athleticism, moving the pocket, RPO game type stuff of the pass sets. And that is that his athleticism allows you to be multiple right now. If a left tackle gets to a spot where you can draft him, you can go do that and leave him at right. If you get past that and you get down into the day 2 and 3, which there are more plentiful right tackles in the lesser rounds than there are left tackles, that allows you to move Juwan over and you can draft another tackle to compete with Lucas Niang, try to see which of the 3 of them can start. I think that is the best move here to spread out the talent across the front, knowing that you have significant strength inside. It is just about shoring up these tackles. They might bring in an interior player this year. I doubt it with Allegretti back in the fold, so I don't think it's a priority. But that makes, in my opinion, the Chiefs draft totally unpredictable when it comes to how they will add it. And I think that means that they could add 2 tackles in this draft as well. Am I overthinking this, or is that a possibility to you too?
No, you're not overthinking it. I mean, I have a mock draft that will be out by the time everybody gets to listen to this on Wednesday, and so that was a strong consideration. Now, this mock draft, I'm not going to lie, went pretty heavy defensively, surprisingly.
All right.
But there were some high early picks offensively too. But that was a strong consideration because it comes down to, where's the depth in the draft at that particular moment? And that's an interesting thing I learned from Brett Veach at the Super Bowl, talking to him about the draft, is that especially when it gets to the later rounds, that it's less about the player and more about the pocket and the position that you're drafting. And that's one of the reasons why I think the Chiefs have had a lot of success in the late rounds. And last year, the 7th round was really productive for them because Brett Veach, when they get ready to come on the board and they're 10 picks away, says, okay, where's the deepest group on the board right now? Where's the deepest position group? And if it's corner, you say, okay, who do we want from these corners? Who's our guy? And, that's, I think it's been an approach that's obviously worked really, really well for them. And that's how a way you have to do it. And you have to be disciplined when you do that. So I think they've got an approach that really works with that. And it goes back to your point, which is that, hey, picking 2 offensive linemen might make a lot of sense because I can see the pockets in this draft at certain points in the draft. It may be in the 5th round that the best position group out there is a tackle. And just because you draft even if you drafted a tackle earlier, you might still be interested in the tackle because you can't have enough of those guys. And right now, as far as proven commodities on this team, you really only have one. And you're asking Jawaan Taylor even to most likely be something he is unproven at, which is a left tackle.
Mhm.
But I want to circle back to your point earlier too, which is that why pay all the money to Jawan Taylor when you had a chance to maybe pay similar to money to Orlando Brown? Well, they acquired. I think that they saw Orlando more as a project than Jawan,
Mm.
because with Orlando was a player that had plenty of metrics and athleticism, that even though his tape wasn't necessarily a match for what they wanted to do to protect Patrick, they felt like that they could teach him that scheme and that he could adapt to it. And I think the Chiefs would say, well, it was close, but it was never quite perfect. Whereas Jawan, they feel as a player who has both, that he's got the metrics, that he's got the athleticism, but he's got a work on film, on tape, of creating the kind of pocket that they want to have for Mahomes. And that even though, hey, different minds may argue. I mean, one football guy may very well say Orlando is a better player than Jawan Taylor. But the Chiefs are going to say, you know what, based on what we've seen on the film, we think that he's just a better fit for the pocket we want from Mahomes.
And it comes back to what we said at the top of the show. Protect your cheat code. That's what you got to do to get things done. If you want to get things done, the cheat code for you guys is going to be Matrix LOC. You can get it at rogueapc.com. The draft guide is chugging along. We're going to have it out here soon. The Athletic Matrix is out there. Well, that code will work for both of them. So check that out. When we get back, what I want to talk about next is what's the next evolution? You provide that wall. Where do you go next? Who are the targets that we might be looking at in this draft right after this? So this is what I think for a defensive-minded person. It's funny that your mock just went heavy defense, because when you take this theory in that it's all about the offensive side of the ball, particularly protecting and providing for your cheat code, PM15, it has tendency to put the defense outside the pocket. But I will argue you need to have a solid defense too. You don't have to have a top 10. I think we've proven that year after year after year, right? So does the more likely investment then come at the weaponry that he has to go to? And I would theory yes. Do you subscribe to that as well?
I do. I mean, I think that when you're building a team, I think what Brett Veach is at least telling us with his actions, if not his words, is that when you've got Patrick Mahomes, one of the realities is that, you know, you're going to have to make some sacrifices on defense. And what have they figured out? I think they have figured out, and at least they decided that their approach for the right now is that you need to have a cheap, lean, young, fast defense, because that's what you can afford. You know, having expensive pieces, I mean, you probably are going to give an extension to Chris Jones, and you're already paying him a lot of money. And when you do that, there's just not a lot of money going around. So how do you spend your money? Well, in the NFL, I mean, speed kills everything else. So you need speed. And what is speed? Speed's usually young. And so I think you're seeing them finally adapt to that. I mean, the Chiefs weren't there. I mean, I think, especially in the transition from John Dorsey to Brett Veach, and because that old defense and the style, I think, especially Bob Sutton's style, was predicated on experience, having an experienced defense. That's not what the Chiefs can't afford an experienced defense.
No.
They can't. That's not in the budget anymore. So what's the second best thing to an experienced defense? It's a fast defense. And that's what you've seen them try to adapt to. And I think last year was obviously part one of the overhaul. Reason why I think that there might be, you know, a decent investment in defense again this year, even though they went defensive heavy last year, is because, yeah, you're going to continue to do that. You need to continue to invest in a young, fast defense. And so I don't think they're going to get away from that.
I have to agree with you. And maybe next time what we'll do is we'll just talk about the defensive structure that we could see happening, because there's value all through this draft at the things that the Chiefs need as well. A lot of visit-oriented things that we'll get to next week as well. But right now, concentrating on those weapons of how you keep Mahomes happy and able to deliver the ball out of his hand and away from danger comes back down to the style and the like you said, speed kills. Does it necessarily have to be a speed-oriented player at every position in this wide receiver group? Taking the mentality that we're building a basketball unit, right? You're going to have point guards. You're going to have, you know, big post-up fives, right? Like, what do you think this evolution of the wide receiver core needs to look like?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because even in this mock draft that I'm doing right now and just finished up, it's interesting because what I looked for early in a receiver wasn't what I was looking for later, and what stood out to me when I started looking at those pockets. Because early, you know, and I'll just tell you, I didn't go receiver in the first round, because this first mock draft was just to see how the everything lays out. So, but there was no trading. So by the time I got to 31, the receivers I would have taken in the first round were gone. So I'm not going to overdraft. I'm not
Yep.
going to take a second round receiver at 31. I need to get value. So went somewhere else. But once that was gone, and then you start getting later in the draft, I ended up taking a guy like Ronnie Bell in the fourth round. Why? Because there's a pocket there of receivers. That was the best pocket that was available. There were a handful of receivers that were all options. But now it's like, okay, the Chiefs, could they use an over the top guy? Yeah, they could. I mean, you were hoping that Marquez could be that last year. Maybe he still could. Is Kadarius, can he be a portion of that with his speed? Maybe. Do they need another one? Yeah, you probably do. But you know what else they need? They need that tough, minded, just headstrong, physical receiver. Because for a lack of a better word, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but some critics could look at the Chiefs wide receiver room right now and say it's a little too finesse. It needs somebody that's tough. And at that point, I'm looking at just the toughest, nastiest receivers there. Ronnie Bell was fit the mold. So yeah, I mean, there's going to be times that you look for different traits at different points in the draft to me.
I like that you mentioned that it's Ronnie Bell, who is not the biggest guy in this class. Toughness doesn't necessarily equate to size. There are guys in different body types at all levels of this draft that I think they're important. Let me ask you this. When you say there wasn't anybody in the first round that you would draft to the wide receiver spot, I assume that the top three in Addison, JSN, and Quentin Johnson were all gone.
Top four. There were four
you...
receivers gone. Zay Flowers was gone too.
Okay. A sudden, tough, thickly built, reminds me a little bit of Tyreek, let's be honest, guy that was gone. Now, I have him in the second tier along with a couple of other guys, including Downs, Jalen Hyatt, that are similar, but a little bit more finesse there. When you get past that theory, where was the next place you were tempted to look for, say, not necessarily a finesse guy, like a tough body, but doesn't have to be a huge body kind of receiver? Was there another pocket that you identified?
Yeah, I mean, it really started in the middle of the draft, kind of coming to that, where I looked at that, because not taking a receiver in the first round, part of it was exactly your rationale there, that there were guys like Jalen Hyatt and some others that would fit in that. There were great second round receivers, at least, as far as my grade goes, and where I think they'd be ideal. Problem is that once again, they all went. That's the way this kind of draft, I think, is going to unfold, is that there's a top tier of 3 or 4 receivers that I think will be gone by 27. I mean, maybe earlier, could be later, but my guess is that if you want a top 4 receiver, you're probably going to have to get inside 27, because that's where Buffalo takes at 27. So they could be interested in the receiver, which means that if there's 3 guys gone at that point, they might take the 4th guy that's left. And if that's the case, then yeah, I mean, I was looking for a speed guy in the second round, and I would have gone that direction had there been any left. But they went. And yeah, then I probably would have circled back again later and looked at that if I thought that the pocket of receivers, say in the 5th or 6th round, was deeper there, because again, to me, you can get guys with speed later in the draft. There's just going to be something wrong with them from a coaching, from a talent observer standpoint, because they're either going to be undersized, maybe a smaller school, maybe it's not as much experience, maybe there's a red flag. Tyreek Hill's a great example about why you get him in the 5th round with his speed. Right. That's going to be the case. And so for me, yeah, I mean, once again, for like Brett Veach's philosophy, it comes down to those pockets. And in the second round, I was looking at a speed receiver that's established and you feel like is a lock. Those guys are all gone, so I'm going a different direction. But later on, like I said, in the mid to late rounds, I'll start looking again to see if there's a pocket of speed receivers that just need more development. And then if that's where there's strength of the draft, maybe you go there.
Is there anything in your mind that makes you think I can go big slot, I can get a Jason Avant V 2.0 and be happy, and that might be something the Chiefs are considering? Or is that now in the Mahomes era out the window?
I don't think that it is. I mean, and I think that, last year's team, I think, kind of proved that, especially when you've now lost what you thought was your ideal weapon in Tyreek Hill, that you can rebuild that room in a lot of different ways. And I think that Patrick Mahomes has proven that he doesn't need one type. that he can work with any type of receiver. And Andy Reid's got a deep playbook. So he can work with anybody. If anything, I think that might excite Andy Reid. And I think it's better for the Chiefs, honestly, when they maybe can get a player that is against type in their skill positions, because it forces them to do something different. And that I think was a challenge for the Chiefs when they had even the transition from Alex Smith to Patrick Mahomes. They had the same weapons. So they weren't always doing anything different. Maybe they were just doing it better with Mahomes, or they were doing it on a different level. But I think you even saw that with Mahomes. He had an MVP last year with a brand new room. Why? Because the Chiefs were doing some things they had done differently, because they had different personnel. They were running some stuff that teams hadn't seen before. You keep doing that. To me, yeah. I mean, you find some body types that Mahomes hasn't played with in the past. Andy Reid's going to have some packages for him that teams haven't seen yet.
And they did that by protecting him, giving him targets, and making the cheat code all that it can be. That's what you can do. Go check out Matt's mock draft over at ChiefsDigest.com. The man on the ground will give you his insight. You can check out all of our work at RogueAPC.com. Right now, the Matrix is out. The draft is coming. The draft guide is available for pre-order right now. Go check it out and use that code MATRIXLOC. That'll get you a nice discount. Matt, thanks for your time today and setting us straight.
always a great time with you, Ryan. Take care, everybody.
Y'all have a good one, and we'll be back with you tomorrow. I am going to run down more fits that you want to see, and then we're going to talk some visits later on Friday. Have a good one. We'll talk to you then.